Bueno, hola, buenos días. Soy Emma, soy la responsable de presentar a nuestra próxima invitada. Contar con la doctora Carol Schall en el Congreso del 40 aniversario de Además y en esta jornada de hoy, dedicada y más especializada a la vida adulta de las personas con TEA, es sin duda un gran honor para nosotros. Es una profesional de referencia en el campo del autismo. Su trabajo, experiencia, proyectos y publicaciones así lo evidencian. Tiene más de 30 años de experiencia en el apoyo a adolescentes y adultos con TEA, como maestra, investigadora y consultora. Ha colaborado en más de 50 artículos, proyectos y publicaciones. Y en la sesión de hoy, en su libro Autismo y la transición a la edad adulta, el éxito más allá del aula, explicará de una forma práctica, funcional y positiva cómo facilitar la transición hacia la vida adulta, la evaluación y preparación necesaria para alcanzar un trabajo y mantenerlo, así como todos los aspectos y habilidades transversales necesarias para ello, sacando el máximo partido a las fortalezas de las personas. La doctora Carol Schall es la codirectora del Centro de Excelencia de Autismo de Virginia de la Commonwealth University, la directora del Centro de Recursos para el Autismo de Virginia y la investigadora principal en el desarrollo de la evaluación de habilidades funcionales para jóvenes en transición con trastorno del espectro del autismo. También desarrolla y es coordinadora de investigación para el proyecto SHIR Plus, del que sin duda nos hablará hoy. Y sin más, doy paso a la doctora Carol Schall.
I am standing up. There is a little bit of a delay between my presentation coming up and what you will see, and so as I get used to that, we'll get used to that together. I can barely see anybody over the stand. I'm actually standing on my tippy toes. I want to say thank you to Espinez for inviting me. I want to thank especially Juan and Sarah who have made this so easy and so wonderful. I want to say happy birthday, 40 years. That's a really big deal. And I also want to thank you for a unique experience last night because I got to see Rudd Turnbull go to a discotheque maybe for the first time in his life. So thank you for that. I don't exactly know where to stand, so I can see you and you can see me. So I'm just going to let my slides do the talking for me. You just have to imagine that I'm back here and trust that it is not a headless voice coming to you. My topic today really is employment. And the delay in the interpreters. Oh, I do need to thank the interpreters as well. Oh, yeah, actually, I would love that. I can hold it. Nah, I'll hold it. I'm good. Can you hear me? Oh, yes, you can. Thank you so much. Okay, so you can see me now. Yesterday's topics really were about self-determination, about the joy quotient, about evidence, and about really understanding how to support individuals with autism. I want to connect my presentation to Luis because today we're talking about hope for a future for people with autism that includes the fullness of all of life. As I heard Luis talking about the young man who wants to buy the 2014 German football team jersey and is coping with what every young adult has to cope with. Do I have enough money in the bank to buy that shirt, right? I thought this fits together perfectly because we're talking about employment now. How do you get that money? And as I talk about employment, I want you to think back to your very first job. And even your very first check, your very first paycheck. Remember that feeling when you had your own money? When you went to the bank, you deposited that money, you got that cash, and you went to a store maybe, and you said, I want that, and it's going to be mine. That joy, that's what we're shooting for with employment. What I have on the screen here is United States statistics. I'm from Virginia in the United States, which is on the East Coast, the other side of the Atlantic. And so we have experienced what you see, which is that people with autism, generally speaking, are graduating from school without jobs, without independent living, and also, most sadly, without friends. Remember those young adults? Remember your own life back then and how you just wanted a friend. And maybe it was at work your first friend came to you and you got to know that person and you got to appreciate that as you become an adult, your life changes a little bit. Well, how do we change what we're looking at when we see our young adults with autism? How do we change that picture that says they don't do the things that the rest of us do? We really have to refocus. It's hard because so much of what we've heard about and what we've talked about is what is different about our young people with autism. But in fact, what we need to do to help these young people understand where to go next is to refocus on their strengths. I know those of you who are parents have seen this. You've seen your young children do things that you never thought possible, better than you can do it. They can put together puzzles better than you can put together puzzles. They can figure out the mechanics of your computer better than you can, right? And so we need to, as we enter adulthood, we need to refocus on those strengths, those interests, and those preferences. I'm reminded of my own growing up. Thankfully, no, I was not very good at physics. You know, the maths, physics, how things stay up in the air and fall down to the ground, gravity, science, all of that. I wasn't very good at physics. No one said to me as I was graduating from high school, you know, you're very bad at physics. In fact, you're so bad at physics, we're going to make you study physics in college and become a physicist. No one thought that was a good idea. And yet, frequently, that's what we do to people with autism, right? We just keep focusing on what they don't do well instead of what they do very well. And so we really need to make that shift for our youth with autism. As they enter secondary school, we have to stop focusing on what's different or not the same as us about them. And instead, look at those strengths, because that's where their future in employment lies. Why do we go to school? Why does it even matter? Why do we worry about school? Well, because basically, and we heard about this yesterday from Anne, quality of life. And Rudd said, quality of life is different for everyone. But in fact, it boils down to some very simple things. How I define my home, what I define as my friends and the places that I like to go are individual. But what we really all want is a place that we call home, places to go, people to see, and we want important things to do. And our youth with autism are no different than the rest of us. And so what we've been doing with my colleague and my mentor, Paul Wayman at VCU for the past 10 years, is to try to figure out, how do we help youth with autism achieve that goal that is just so simple, so basic, and so straightforward? And so how do you get that life? How do you achieve that home of your own? It's really pretty simple. It's a job. How do I say that? Trabajo? Trabajo? Okay? Trabajo. It's a job. Get a job and the rest begins to come along. Get a job and you can buy your 2014 German football club jersey, right? Get a job and you can go to the discotheque with Rudd on a Friday night. So, and what kind of job? We really mean real work for real pay. I want to tell you about all of these guys. All of these pictures are individuals that we worked with. This young man I've known since he was 3 years old. That's him with his very first check. That's Sam. Sam is a young man who at the age of 3 didn't use words at all, was really, really challenging. In fact, when he went to school, his principal said that his parents should just put him away, send him to an institution. He could never be around his peers without disabilities because he would be so traumatized and they would be so traumatized that they couldn't be okay. But Sam today works at the gym at the university. He loves that job. I got an email from his mom just last week, and she said, I cannot tell you how happy Sam is. Every day I ask him about his job. She says, is there anything you don't like about your job, Sam? And he says, nope, I love my job. So Sam is leading a happy life because he's working at a gym where he gets to be with the athletes. He loves that. This is Annie. Annie works in the mother and infant unit at a hospital where she folds baby t-shirts. She prepares the bassinets for the babies. She cleans the breastfeeding room, the nursing room for the mothers. And she puts together packets of information for new mothers. She's making a living wage and doing very well. This is AJ. AJ is one of my favorite people in the world. Now, when you look at that picture, just like yesterday, who has autism in there? One of those guys do. Maybe it's this guy. Maybe it's this guy with the weird mustache. I mean, it is, after all, 2000s. Why does he have a 1960s mustache, right? No, it's AJ right here, the guy with his arms around his colleagues. These people have important things to do, places to call home, and people to see that they care about and that care about them. And these people don't really care that they have autism. What they care is that AJ and Sam and Annie come in and do their jobs. And that's what makes a difference. And they understand that sometimes when you're at work, you don't talk like everybody else talks. The fact that Sam is very difficult to understand is no different than their colleagues who maybe speak different languages. The fact that Annie sometimes has some behavior problems is no different than their other colleagues that have bad moods. In fact, I have a really heartwarming story about Annie, working in the mother and infant unit. I'm going to try to tell this story without tears coming down my face, but it's very moving. So Annie was at work. She happens to have autism and Down syndrome. We heard about the comorbidities yesterday. She was at work, and her supervisor, the nurse manager of the unit, was also at work with her. Well, one of the new dads came up to the nurse manager and said, "Who is that?" And the nurse manager said, "That's my colleague. She works here." And the father said, "You pay her?" And the nurse manager was getting a little nervous, so her back went straight, and she was ready for a fight. And yes, we pay her. She works very hard. And she was ready to defend Annie. This big, burly man, this brand new father, then cried and hugged the nurse manager, saying, "Thank you. My son was just born, just like her. Until this moment, I didn't think my son would have a life. But because Annie works here, I now believe that I can hope for my child." So today is about hope. What we really want to talk about is how do we get to these pathways? How do we get from here, where people are secluded and away from others, to here, where people are getting jobs? And so the pathways to employment are what I'm going to focus the rest of my talk about. Okay, so now I'm a professor at a university, and as you saw all of our professors do, I'm required to provide data. So you'll see graphs. It's required. If we don't do it, they take our cards away from us. They won't let us back in at work. So we're going to talk about some of this data that we collect. And I'm very interested, Luis, you use the support intensity scale, correct? This SIS, S-I-S. We use that as well. It's a very good instrument, and so it will be interesting to see how we use the same scales that you use here in Sevilla to understand how we see the changes that come about. We're also going to spend a moment talking about supported employment, which is a model that my friend and mentor Paul Wayman developed. And we'll talk about what it means to have support at work from a disability specialist. We're going to talk very specifically about customized employment because that's a very important aspect of what we do for people with autism. And then finally, we're going to talk a little bit, touch on post-secondary education, but we might not have a lot of time to do that, so not to worry. Okay, so Project Search is a 9-month program. That's the length of our school year in the United States, from September through about June. Our youth with ASD do not go to their high school, their secondary school. Instead, they go to a large business like a hospital, a bank, a government center, a university. And instead of going to school where they learn to read and write, where they learn to do maths, where they learn to any other skills, they're going to learn instead in this large business where they're going to actually work in jobs. During this time, they're going to have 3 internships. Each internship is going to be about 10 to 12 weeks. Now, I want you to think about this for a second and about our youth with autism. If I want to teach a young child, a 5-year-old, a 6-year-old, to identify their colors, how long does it take me? It takes a long time. They have to practice those skills every day, every day. You have to say, what color is this? Red. What color is this? Red. What color is this? Red. Well, then when they get to adulthood and they've spent their whole lives learning their colors, but we haven't taught them how to work. And we expect that if we take them into a job and we just show them for a week or two, they'll learn that skill when it took them years to learn to identify the color red. And so by having them go to school and have these internships, they actually get to practice those job skills every day, the same jobs. 10, 15 times a day, they say hello to their supervisor or their coworkers. 10, 15 times a day, they help a customer, or they put something away, or they stock items, so that they learn those job skills in the same way that we taught them their colors when they were young children. Make sense? Okay. In addition, I lost the Spanish here for a second. In addition, they learn marketable job skills. Marketable. I didn't know the word marketable in Spanish. Is this one marketable? This is job skills. Job skills, marketable. Got it. Yes. So, and that's very important. When we go into these large businesses, we say to them, business, what are the positions you have difficulty finding people to do? Okay? So think about that. If you're in a hospital, guess what they have trouble hiring people to do? Folding baby shirts, cleaning the nursing room, cleaning the bays where, you'll see a video in a second of Stephanie in the endoscopy unit. How many of you know what a colonoscopy is? If you're over 50, you've learned, right? Not fun. That's a hard position to hire, right? I'm going to clean up the beds. It's smelly and it's loud. Okay? Now, how do we meet the needs of the fact that these are still young people with autism who have difficulty communicating, who have difficulty sometimes with frustration and may have behavior challenges? Well, we make sure that they get behavioral consultation from a behavior analyst. In addition to the research, that was a lot of my job. We also make sure that the structure is consistent. Structure for people with autism is so important, and I think one of the hardest things that happens in adulthood is they move from this school life where every day I had the same teacher at the same school at the same time, and I did the same things, and then they move into adulthood, and that structure is gone. We make sure that we behaviorally define social skills. Remember the picture of AJ? He was the guy who had his arms around his coworkers. Well, he got in trouble. AJ really wants a girlfriend. He's a adorable, attractive young man, and he really wants a girlfriend. And he's not very good at hiding the fact that he wants a girlfriend. Now, here in Spain, it would be okay. But in the United States, if a pretty woman comes near you and you look at her like this at work, that's not okay. You get in trouble. In Spain, okay. In the U.S., right? So AJ, a pretty woman, got on the elevator, and he looked her up and down, like, He was interested, and his boss said, "You have to come and meet with me. We have a complaint about you because you looked at a woman like she was a woman instead of a coworker." So AJ goes into the boss's office, and the boss says, "Now, AJ, you have to learn to take the high road with customers." In the United States, that means you have to be on your best behavior. It's a euphemism. It's a cliche. Take the high road. Okay? AJ came out, and I said, "AJ, how did it go?" Now, we prepared AJ for that whole talk. We told him he was going to sit down. He was going to say, "Yes, sir." He was going to thank his boss for helping him be a better worker. He was going to do all the things that a good employee should do, and he did all of those. When he came outside, though, and I said, "How did it go, AJ? What did your supervisor tell you?" And he scratched his head, and he said, "He told me to take the high road. I take the bus." So we had to take that word, the high road, and tell him what it meant. So here's what the high road means to AJ. Stop, say, "I'm sorry," call your job coach, call your supervisor. So now he understands. If I were to say to AJ, "What's the high road?" AJ would say, "Stop, say I'm sorry, call Alyssa, my job coach, call my supervisor." In other words, he's learning what the high road means is a very specific set of behaviors that help him. We use lots and lots of visual supports. Lots of them. We make sure that our youth understand what's expected of them, and you'll see some examples, I think, or maybe not. We use a lot of self-monitoring. We teach our youth to collect data on their own behavior. And I think you're probably thinking at this point, you must be working with very smart, very high-functioning, not intellectually disabled youth. But I think I'm going to surprise you in a second. And then finally, we instruct, monitor, collect data. Okay? So that's what Project Search plus ASD supports is. So Stephanie was working in the endoscopy unit, and to prepare her to work there, the job coach, Alyssa, who you heard talk on the screen, actually downloaded a middle school boys fart noise app. And she would play that app to see if Stephanie would respond inappropriately, and Stephanie did not. This video was recorded about 7 years ago. Stephanie is still a worker in the department. She makes, I think she's now at about $11 an hour, which I'm guessing is about $14.40 So she's making a decent living. She's working about 25 hours a week, which works for her schedule. She's busy all day long. She goes home tired. Her feet hurt. She has learned to cope with the things that we all cope with as workers. When we go home, every day is not roses. Every day is not wonderful for her. Some days are rough. Some days are really good. But Stephanie is an excellent worker, and her coworkers value her. Now, notice that the job coach didn't just work with Stephanie. The job coach also worked with her coworkers. Because of Stephanie's echolalia, her coworkers would say, Stephanie, clean room 8. And Stephanie would say, clean room 8. And they would think, oh, good, Stephanie understands. But what do we know about autism? Did she understand? She didn't. So they learned that they need to write things down for her to understand what's expected of her. I want to show you what her mother had to say in an email the day that Stephanie got a job. Oops. It looks like I don't have that. No worries. No worries. I'll tell you what her mother said. Her mother said that she was in tears because she was so happy that Stephanie had got a job. That was the thing that she hoped for her daughter all of her life. She said that it took her a while to explain to Stephanie that she was not sad. She was happy. And as she explained to Stephanie, I'm happy. You got a job. Stephanie would repeat, I got a job. I got a job. And each time she said it, Stephanie would get louder and prouder. I got a job. Her mother then said, what I've always hoped and prayed for was that someone would see Stephanie the way I see her, as a young woman with lots of gifts and skills to give the world, someone who wants to contribute in her own way. And that's what they got through this program as a result of Stephanie working. So, what are internships? It's important to note that they are time-limited educational experiences. And the reason that's important is because we don't want our youth to work for free. Lots and lots of professions require internship experiences. Doctors have to be interns before they're allowed to practice. Nurses need to have practicums. Teachers have to have interns. Well, our youth with autism need these training experiences to help them understand how to work. As they learn these real skills, they show their coworkers that they're employable. And so Stephanie could not sit in an interview. She could not go to a business and walk in with her resume and sit down and say, I'm here, please interview me, right? That interview would be very odd. They would say, Stephanie, what do you think your strengths are? Strengths are, yes. Stephanie, what do you like to do? Like to do good work, yes. You know, so that would be a very odd interview. Instead, we took video, video of Stephanie, movies of her working, and we presented a video resume to her future workers. One of our youth with autism who went for an interview, who could participate in the interview, was guilelessly honest. And so here's how his interview went. He was being hired in the maintenance department at St. Mary's Hospital where he had done his internship. And he sat down with his future boss, and his future boss said, you've been here working with us. What do you like about the hospital? Now, if it were you and me in that interview, we would say, oh, I love the people. I love the work. We'd be, shoveling, giving them a line, trying to impress them with how loving and smart we were. But my guy sat there for a while, thought harder, and thought harder again, and then he said, lunch. I really like lunch here. So it's not the interview. Interviews are the worst way to hire people. Right? Those of you who are bosses know that. You interview people and sometimes they're just awful. So Maybe we should all have videos of ourselves working before we get hired. Here's Stephanie's mom's quote. Once it comes up. There it is. For those of you who speak English, I've explained it. So now we're going to meet Dave. Dave came with more challenges. In fact, we have this department called the Department of Aging and Rehabilitative Services, DARS, or the Department of Rehabilitation, DORS. And they assessed Dave and said he's unemployable. Well, he had difficult behaviors. He would run if he were afraid, lock himself in a room. He would push through you if you were trying to block you. I got to read a little bit more. If he was told no or corrected, he would have extremely difficult behaviors. And he had very, very low verbal abilities. Okay? So Dave was really a guy who we thought, this is going to be hard to figure out. How do we get him a job? So with Dave, we decided to look at his strengths. Dave could read. He couldn't talk. He couldn't tell you what he was talking about, but he could read. And that was a splinter skill that we thought, let's take advantage of that. He had an excellent memory for long sequences of tasks. And he loved to do things exactly the same way every time. I can't tell you how important that is in a hospital, to have someone who will do things the exact same way every single time. He was also calmed by videos of Godzilla. I cannot figure this out. I can tell you personally, I sat with Dave one day when he was really upset and he wanted to run. And all I had to do was turn on a video of Godzilla destroying Tokyo. And he was very happy and calm. And music to Dave's ears. So, the way we help Dave is by increasing his independence. Notice that the triggers that triggered his behavior were being talked to, being corrected, having to interact with people. So the key to avoiding problem behavior for Dave is independence. And so here's how we did that. We created a consistent routine for him. He's going to enter his job and do the same things in the exact same way every day. And we did that through visuals. By the way, I got to see some of your wonderful programs here in A Corunna. And I absolutely loved how visuals were driving all of the students' days and how they were interacting with their world. That's the beginning of getting these guys ready to work. We taught Dave to follow his schedule, and then we built positive reinforcement into his day. And his positive reinforcement was really important. So his first internship is in radiology, where he is working as a custodian. And his job, it was a simple job because we wanted to see, can we get Dave to follow a schedule? But it was also an important job where he was wiping down the railings. And so it was very structured. You take a disinfectant wipe and you follow the railing all the way down, and if it turns, you turn with it. It was a really good job for Dave. His second job was cleaning the hospital lobbies and the elevator bays. And he loved to move a vacuum. In fact, if I were standing by the elevator, he would vacuum right up to my heels, bumping the can't you move? So he did this job with great gusto. And then his third job, his third internship, was sterilizing and resetting pulse ox monitors in the hospital. This was a very detailed job, but it just involved plugging the machine in, pushing buttons, clearing the data, and then wiping down all of the cords. And he was so thorough and so careful that he never made a mistake at this job. So how do we teach him to follow his schedule? We review his schedule with him, and then we help him through it. We prompt him all the way through it. Day 1. Day 2, we continue to follow him, and we shadow him. His schedule included crossing streets at a big suburban hospital. So we taught him how to cross streets. We fade the prompts little by little, and then we include lots and lots of positive reinforcement. Dave loved high fives. Didn't have to talk to him, just give him a high five. I don't know if you noticed when I was visiting your school here, I kept on trying to give students high fives. It's a thing in the U.S. It's not a thing here, I don't think. Minimal talking. The less we talk to Dave, the better. The more independent he is, the better. Watch Godzilla all he wants on break. And then every day he would take home the Godzilla report to his mom. And the Godzilla report, it was a picture of Godzilla, and it would tell his mom, I had a great day at work. And he loved his Godzilla report. His job coaches were in the office every day finding new pictures of Godzilla to laminate and put in a file for him. So here's Dave today. So Dave's a custodian in another hospital. Yeah. There's even more. There's even more. So Dave's a custodian in another hospital. He's working very well. We figured out a lot of support for him. Now, his job coach is present at work, but not following him everywhere. That's really important. We don't want Dave to feel like he's now married his job coach and they go everywhere together, you know. We want Dave to have that sense of independence. The job coach is present to help if Dave needs it, and then leaves when Dave is independent. So, beyond Dave, it'll come up in a second. You might look at Dave's work and think, okay, he's a custodian, no big deal. But because of the work that he was doing, the department where he's cleaning had a 50% decrease in absenteeism during cold and flu season. Because he's so thorough and so careful and wipes down every single surface. He does a better job than his coworkers without autism because he loves that routine. He wants to do it exactly right every single time. And the department is thrilled with his work. Here are some of the supports that we use to help Dave learn. This is how we taught him to vacuum this big, overwhelming hospital lobby. These were where the elevators were. This was a sitting area for patients to wait. This was an area with a plant in the middle of it. And so we just created zones for him to help him understand how is he going to vacuum this huge area that's a little overwhelming. This is hard for you to read because it's in English, but Dave had this interesting behavior. He loved pushing elevator buttons. And imagine getting on the elevator, and Dave's there, and he's already pushed every single button. And you're like, this is going to be a long ride. Dave's the only guy on the elevator, and we're going to stop at every floor. Or even worse, Dave loved pushing the buttons. So if it was a really crowded elevator and maybe somebody's tucked in right by the buttons, Dave would get between them, butt them back with his butt. In basketball, we call it boxing out. He would literally box them back so he could push all the buttons. And so we went over this with him every day to teach him, if there's people on the elevator, don't get in front of them, don't push them back, wait your turn. You'll get to push your button. Wait your turn. So we have to teach those social skills to Dave. We really have to help him understand that it's okay for you not to push the buttons every time. You'll get to push the buttons tomorrow, right? There's going to be an elevator ride. Here's what we found out. So this is our control group. We did a randomized clinical trial where we had 54 total subjects. Now, Phil will tell you, and we talked about this, that our control group dropped out at a higher rate than our treatment group. So we ended up with 31 people who went through the treatment, 18 who remained in the control. Our statistical model adjusted for the dropout. And so without any intervention, our control group was employed about 12% of them. Whereas our treatment group, you can see their employment just goes up. After a full year, after graduating from the program, 87% are still employed. And we're continuing to follow these numbers, and we're continuing to see retention rates in the 80% range. What do we know about people with autism? Don't mess up their routine. If it's time to go to work, it's time to go to work. We get a lot of snow in Virginia every so often. It feels like it's the end of the world to us. So we rush out and we buy milk and bread because we may never eat again. But our youth with autism will start to walk to work miles and miles because they want to be at work. So we published this study in 2017, and then we repeated that study now with 156 people. We had 4 different hospitals, 3 different school divisions and a regional program, and 2 different job coach agencies. So this is our expansion, right? This was a second randomized clinical trial. We had 81 treatments, 75 controls, and yet again, we see our controls do not get employment, but our treatment group continues to get employment. So big effect sizes. Now, Phil would take this data and turn it into an effect size, and it would be very large. It would be at like 0.8 or higher, right? With decent numbers, all of that. That wasn't enough for us. We wanted to know, okay, so are they making a fair wage? How many hours a week are they working? And how long does it take them to get employment? I can tell you our treatment group, it takes them more than a year to get employment. Our control group takes them more than a year. But our treatment group is employed within 18.8 weeks. Weeks? Yes. Of graduating, it does say weeks, right? Yep. Of graduating high school. Okay? It's what we want for our youth, right? They're working about 21.2 hours, and that ranges from 4 hours to 40. Most of our folks are working part-time. In the United States, we have some disability support programs that provide funding that will only allow people to work so many hours per week. They are earning between about $9.61 an hour, but between $7.25 to $11.83 an hour. I figured it out this morning. About $11.83 is about 1440 euros. Okay, and they are, in terms of Virginia, that's 33% above minimum wage, which is pretty decent. Now, we know in the United States that this is not a living wage. However, these youth also get a lot of supports. And so suddenly, that 2014 German football team jersey is within reach if this is the money that I'm making, right? Okay? So, where did these guys work in terms of the supports that they got? Now, here, the blue bar is our treatment group, and the red bar is our control group. We had a few people working without support. But the majority of these people, as you saw the videos, really were people with high support needs, right? And so we had one person in the control group who went on to college, but the majority of our treatment group folks are working with support, while the majority of our control group folks are just remaining in high school. And in high school, they're not learning how to work, okay? Now, where did they work in terms of industries? The majority of them are working in healthcare. A number of them, I'm going to have to look at my slide so I can read the English. A number of them are working in food service and then retail, which is, businesses like stores, grocery stores, etc. Our guys are really good at complex routine tasks. So when you think of working in a store and stocking products or managing various departments and the product in department, they're really good at that. We also have a number of people who are working in hospitality in the United States. That would be tourism or travel. So that would be hotels, parks, places like that. A number of people are working as distributors or manufacturers. This little slice is manufacturers. We have a couple of folks who are working in entertainment. A couple of folks, and Sam is one of my guys who's working in sports and recreation. A few people are working in education in daycare centers. Some of our folks really wanted to work in daycare centers, and so we build the program to meet their needs. And then finally, one of our folks is working as a scheduler. This is someone with more abilities in transportation, okay? And so there's a wide variety of employment opportunities that our youth with autism get, okay? So what do the people with ASD experience as a result of work? We know we like it that they make money. We like it that they like their jobs. But do they get anything else from their jobs? Well, we use the support intensity scale. That's the same scale that Luis used. And what we found was they did significantly better in employment activities, community living activities, home living, health and safety, lifelong learning, and social activities. And so this is a beginning of a line of research where we're asking ourselves, is it possible that work is therapy? Is it possible that someone with autism who goes to work actually doesn't just work, but gets better with their autism? And guess what we found out? Yes, it's possible. Now, these are small, and we didn't, for those of you who are graduate students and all about statistics, this study was not powered for this outcome. A lot of questions. We probably need more people to really round out these numbers. But what we're seeing is pre and post tests are showing that our youth with autism, even in an underpowered study, are getting better at all areas of life. Community living, daily living. Remember, Luis was saying, these guys are saying they don't want to go out in the community, so they're not accessing the community. But if your coworker says to you, hey, I'm going to the discotheque, want to come? Maybe you might, right? Just like Rudd did last night. Rudd, how was the discotheque? Marvelous, he said. Marvelous. So, their overall support needs come down. Remember, this is an N of 81. It's a pretty nice number in autism research. Phil will tell you that the Lovaas study from 1984 was an N of 11? 18 and 11 in two different groups. So this is an N of 81, which is a pretty big number. It's a pretty powered number. Now, again, it's underpowered for this, but this is overall support needs. Go down pretty significantly. And exceptional behavioral support needs go down. These guys did have behavior challenges that we see in autism, and even their support needs as it comes to behavior are resolving. Turns out if you're doing things that you like to do, maybe you don't have to misbehave as much. Maybe all you need is a Godzilla poster to make your life a little better. Okay, so turns out that we hypothesize that competitive, integrated employment can reduce support needs in individuals with significant autism. Wow. I had to search to find the Spanish word for wow. That is it, right? That's not a curse word, right? Good. Good. I was a little worried. You can never trust Google. Google can lead you astray. Okay. So what do their coworkers say? This is all well and good, Carol. All well and good. But there are people who are trying to do their jobs, and are these people with autism getting in their way? This is important work that they're doing, right? Working in a hospital is a very important job. Are these people getting in their way? Well, the coworkers say they increased our morale. We feel better about going to work because we have a coworker with autism working next to us. Now, these are not autism experts. These are people, right? Stephanie's coworkers love her. She sends them these kind of wacky emails where she ends every sentence with, "I love you very much." You know, "Happy Easter, I love you very much. I hope you had a good day at work, I love you very much." Who wouldn't want to get an email like that? I would. I loved Stephanie's emails. It gives the staff an increased sense of mission. It gives them a sense that we are being productive together, that together we're going to do this, that if this guy with autism can come to work every day and work really hard and outperform me, maybe I ought to step up my game, right? The managers actually have said to us, this stuff that you're teaching us about how to help people with autism, can I use it with that guy over there that doesn't have autism? And we say, yeah. Yeah, if you have a problem employee, yeah, you can set up a reinforcement program to get them to work a little harder. That's okay. It opens the minds of the coworkers and managers of disability. Now, not all of those people, but some of those people will be parents of children with autism or Down syndrome, or they'll have grandchildren who have disabilities. And suddenly the world is a little different for them because they have a coworker next to them that's making a difference in their lives. And so now they're thinking about the world a little differently. Diversity is a big deal. So, after 2 randomized clinical trials, the scientific standard is that this meets an evidence-based practice. And I am so thankful for Phil's talk yesterday about the importance of evidence-based practices and implementation. And so we feel like we've met the scientific standard of evidence here, which is kind of a nice thing. So why does this work? Well, the practice of real work experience. You know, when you're learning to work in a school, your teacher can't fire you. If you make a mistake at work, you have to learn how to work your way through that. It's one of our first experiences as adults, right? Getting that in high school is very important. We don't have the array of supports available to youth once they get out of high school. Luis will tell you, it's a different world. In high school, you have a teacher, you have speech therapists, you have occupational therapists, you have psychologists. You can't walk down the hall without tripping over a psychologist, right? When you're in high school. But when you get to adult life and you're living in your own apartment, your own flat, there's not as many people around, is there, Luis? And so we need to do this while they're in high school so that they have that support to learn. We use ABA as a positive instructional tool. We don't use discrete trial. Phil showed you a slide yesterday that showed you what discrete trial is. We use an awful lot of task analysis, behavioral rehearsal. We also use a lot of reinforcement, and we use self-monitoring. One of the things you have to learn as an adult, and some of us are still working on this every day, is to self-monitor your own behavior. Okay? We use personalized vocational assessment. By having these youth work through these internships, we learn what they really like to do and what they don't like to do. And then we actually are working on a seamless transition to adulthood because they're having these internships in places where they could potentially work. Then we're getting video of them. We're getting them connected with adult service agencies. They leave high school with a resume. Do you know what that is, resume? That's something you use here, right? A listing of everything that you've done in your life that tells people that I'm a good worker. And then we also focus on business needs. When we go into these departments, we say to them, what do you need done? What's important to you as a business? We are not looking for charity. We are not looking for businesses to give people with autism jobs because they're nice. We are looking to match people with skills to businesses that need work done. I'm going to tell you a quick story about Damien, who is a young man with autism who is very, very particular that things are arranged just right. He lined things up. Well, there are a lot of jobs where you have to line things up. One job in particular is a hospital pharmacy. Anybody ever work in a hospital pharmacy? There are more medicines in a hospital pharmacy than you would ever see in your local pharmacy in your neighborhood. Because every single medicine that might be needed in a hospital is individually bubble packed in its own. So you don't have bottles and bottles of pills. You have individual bubble packed pills. Each pill is dated to expire. Those hospital pharmacies, because you have about 1 billion white little pills and yellow little pills and purple little pills, they become a mess. Because if I'm a pharmacist and I'm moving fast and I pick up the wrong pill and I put it back in the wrong place, I'm going to make a med error, right? Well, Damien goes through that pharmacy with his eye for detail and pulls out every single expired medication and puts the rest of the medications in order. They've decreased their errors in that hospital, their medication errors, to near zero, because Damien is going through that hospital pharmacy every day to make sure those medicines are in order. That's a job that I could not do, because I would be standing there getting bored, hoping somebody would come by and talk to me. Somebody would come by and talk to me about the German football team. I'd turn around, I'd talk about the game, forget where I was, and make a mistake. If I walk by Damien and I say, Damien, what you doing? You know what he's going to say? Working. Leave me alone. That's what you should say if you're doing that job, right? I'm working. Leave me alone. So he's really helping that business. So this is not about charity. This is about real work that needs to be done. I want to tell you one more story, and then I think I'm done. But this is Mark. And Mark has very severe behavior. He was a big guy with a very short attention span, very low verbal skills, lots of self-stimulatory behavior. You'll see him in a minute. Lots of rocking. I have one more video. And he is a big guy, so people were afraid of him. And we were a little afraid, is Mark the one who's going to break us? Can we figure out how to work with Mark? So we start him off in central parking because, first of all, he can't hurt a car. If he gets mad and decides to throw something, cars are pretty tough. It might cost us a little bit of money to fix the car, but it's okay. So we start him sweeping, taking out the trash, because we want to observe, can he follow a schedule? How does he deal with correction? Is he safe? Will he harm himself? Will he harm others? He had a lot of hitting himself, self-injurious behavior. We also want to see him complete tasks, and we want our behavior analyst to come in and work on a behavior plan while he's doing a job that's relatively safe, okay? Not a lot of patient or coworker interaction in this job. Does well. Second job, he's going to stock janitorial closets, those closets throughout hospitals that are filled with cleaning supplies, filled with towels, paper towels, sponges, etc. Third job, he's going to move to the hospital lobby and he's going to clean that, okay? We worked through with Mark, and here, those carts, are sterilization unit carts for surgical instruments. And Mark is sterilizing surgical instruments that will go into a surgery the next day. How many of you thought a person with autism, with those kinds of behaviors, with those kinds of, we call it rocking, not this kind of rocking, this kind of rocking, would be okay doing that kind of job? And so I'm going to leave you with this, and then we have our coffee break. I think I have a few minutes for questions. Did I bring up? Yes, I did. I brought my interpreter ears. So what questions might you have? Oopsies.
Buenos días. Habló básicamente de la transición de la educación secundaria a la vida adulta, ¿no? En eso se basan un poco los estudios. A mí me gustaría saber qué datos tienen sobre una vez que se hace esa transición a la vida adulta, ¿cuál es el impacto que tiene la persona con autismo a lo largo de su plan de vida? Es decir, a lo largo de toda su vida, ¿no? Porque cualquiera de nosotros en nuestro trabajo llega un momento en el que nos sentimos estresados o hemos tenido pues épocas en las que nuestra motivación ha bajado. Ellos tienen sus propios procesos personales de acomodación a las circunstancias personales y eso tenemos que incardinarlo también dentro de su práctica laboral, ¿no? Entonces me gustaría saber si tienen datos significativos sobre un poco toda esa transición, ya no solamente de la edad escolar, ya a una vida adulta, sino bueno, pues ya a una edad más madura. Eso por una parte. ¿Cómo van gestionando de alguna manera, bueno, pues la parte laboral con los conflictos interpersonales que se puedan suscitar en las determinadas organizaciones? Porque es una evidencia, es decir, los conflictos surgen, las personas cambian, los compañeros cambian. Eso supone que ese sistema está en continuo cambio y que para ellos nosotros tengamos que estar interviniendo continuamente para poder adaptarnos y darles respuesta a las necesidades que ellos tienen. Entonces, ¿cómo gestionan?
Hold on.
Ya me callo. Paro,
I was going to
sí.
say, my brain is not as big as it used to be, and I'm a little afraid that I'll lose your questions if you go on to a third question. Great questions, and then I'll come back to you for the third question, okay?
Sorry.
Okay, so first question you asked about is over the data over the lifetime. Okay, data over the lifetime. We don't have much of that yet. We've been at this for 10 years, and the data that we have on the people that I've presented today, all of them are still employed. All of them, Dave has been employed for 10 years. Mark has been employed because he came into the program a little bit later for 5 years. Stephanie is at 7 years in her employment. And what we see in terms of just employment is that these youth actually earn more money over time, just like any other worker. They also get more hours, and their jobs do change. And the second part of your question is change is inevitable, and you are exactly right. And so supported employment allows for these youth to become independent, and then when changes occur, we can re-enter the supports for them. So we actually do come back in. And so for Stephanie, she had some additional responsibilities added into her job, and she did get more supported employment during that time so that she could take care of those responsibilities. We have had people lose their jobs, and what we do at that point is the job coach gets back to work and finds the person a new job based on their experiences. So Sam, remember Sam from the very first slide? He was very proudly holding his first check. He had a job at a hospital that he lost, and he lost it because his behavior interfered with his success. He had a new job coach. The job coach worked with him and his family, and because he had working experience, they were able to turn around and find him the new job at the gym where he's working right now. And so those changes happened. There's another aspect of your question, though, that I want to highlight that I think is very important and might be something that we pick up with the panel with Luis. I'm good on time? Okay. So Luis was talking about the community aspects, the home living aspects of having a life. And our youth also want to have a life. AJ still wants a girlfriend. And that's an absolutely positively normal thing for a 25-year-old man to want a girlfriend, right? Who in the age of 25 didn't want a girlfriend? Raise your hand. Okay, maybe you wanted a boyfriend. But that's another story, another topic, another conference. But AJ still wants a girlfriend, and that still sometimes interferes with his work life because he's learning how to manage that's personal and this is work. Okay? And so for AJ, we have to go back in and we have to help him and we have to support him again. And so you're exactly right. With the model that we're using, for most, and we found that there are 3 different levels of intensity that I've kind of showed you today. Stephanie is minimal intensity. We have to check in with her. We have to check in with her supervisor about twice a month to make sure that she's doing her job. We talk to her mom, and we make sure that Stephanie's doing okay. If there's a new employer, if there's a new coworker that Stephanie has to work with, if her department moves, that happens sometimes. Sometimes you move when you work. We actually reactivate our job coaches, send them back in. They help Stephanie adjust to the change. They move back out, and Stephanie's independent. So Stephanie only needs us to contact her usually about twice a month. If there are any changes, we'll go back in and we'll help Stephanie. Okay? That's minimal level of support. There's a moderate level of support. And I don't actually have a video today, but I have a video of a young woman named Ellen who's loud and proud and every so often gets herself into trouble. And Ellen is one of these people, I have so many electronics in my hands. Ellen is one of these people who she's doing very well, and then she does something that's weird. And then she's doing very well, and then she has a tantrum. And so we don't have to help Ellen every single day. We can leave Ellen alone for a long period of time, and then she has some problems, and we have to go back in pretty frequently. Ellen requires us overall across a year about 4 to 7 hours a month of us coming in, working with Ellen, helping her be calm. Ellen is funny. She's very curious. And if I had the video of Ellen, you would hear her say, "I'm too curious." Ellen walked into the CEO's suite. They had redone the president of the hospital's office. It was beautiful. It was one of these rooms where you wave your hands and the light goes on, and you sit down and the screens come up. I mean, who wouldn't want to sit in that chair, right? So Ellen's walking around, and she sits in the CEO's office, and she's having fun playing with all the new electronic toys, and she gets in trouble. So we had to go in and teach her, you can't go into the CEO's office. You can't go in the president's office. That's his office. Your desk, yes, we're sorry. You don't have the screens that float up. We're very sorry, but that's the way it is. So we have to go in and help Ellen. Mark, we never leave alone. Mark needs a lot of support. Now, let me rephrase that. We're always present in case he needs us. We leave him alone a lot, but we're there in case he has a problem behavior. And so he's high intensity, where our job coaches are not glued to Mark. They're sitting in another room. They're working on some of their other work. But if they're listening, they're checking in on Mark about once a day. They're making sure he's okay. So we found that there are 3 levels of intensity, and we're able to fund the program the way the U.S. funds vocational services because we can spread that across that level. Now, I know you had another question, and I didn't want to lose it. So do you want to go to your other question? Did I answer your questions?
No, básicamente ya ha dado respuesta. Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you. Other questions?
Hola.
Hola.
Primero, felicidades por la ponencia. Segundo, gracias por demostrar que se puede. Y tercero, me gustaría saber ¿Cómo están financiando este proyecto? ¿Es a través de las administraciones? ¿Es a través de la universidad? ¿Cuáles son los fondos que permiten que estas personas tengan un terapeuta que les acompañe a lo largo de la inclusión laboral?
Thank you. Excellent question. Excellent question. So in the United States, we have federal funding for rehabilitative services. And what that means is that each state gets money to help all kinds of people with disabilities work. So if I were to, God forbid, but I could do it, fall down and break my leg, and I needed physical therapy, the United States funds a service that would provide me with part-time work to help me get back to work. It's that same funding that provides support to individuals with all kinds of disabilities. So whether your disability is temporary, like a broken leg, or permanent, like autism, you can access what we call vocational rehabilitation funds. And so the funding for the job coaches comes from the state through vocational rehabilitation. Now, I could get into a long discussion of how those funds are sometimes good, sometimes not so good, how we need more money, how it's not enough. But suffice for now that the idea of having the state fund job coaches is cheaper than having the state fund long-term services. Because Mark, Dave, and Stephanie are going to need lifelong services. And it's better that they work and they're now taxpayers and they're helping fund their own services than they not work and just have services that are not meeting their needs and that are leaving them less independent. I think Louise had the same discussion about in-home living. This is a cheaper model. The more we have people contribute, live in the community, live the lives like that we live, the more they contribute. So that when Dave goes to McDonald's and buys his hamburger at the end of his workday, he's paying taxes that help pay for his services. That's better than Dave not making any money at all. So that's how we fund it in the United States. It sounds like it's perfect there, but it's really not. We wish there were more money. We wish more people, and I don't want to paint a picture like you could move to any state in the nation and get these services. We are still learning ourselves. We are not perfect in the United States, far from it. And in fact, I think in many ways your services here are superior to ours because you have a really good social net to help people. But suffice to say that that's how we fund it. Does that make sense? Good.
Thank you.
Thank you. One more question? Oh, get my ears on.
Hola, buenos días. En primer lugar, felicitarle y decirle que estoy encantada con su ponencia, porque realmente pues nosotros ya venimos trabajando, bueno, yo soy de la Asociación Horizonte de Madrid, hay mucha gente que nos pueda conocer y llevamos 20 años trabajando en empleo con apoyo con personas con autismo gravemente afectadas, ¿no? Nuestro mentor también fue el doctor Paul Wiman, o sea que tenemos ahí líneas conjuntas, con lo cual mi encanto es doblemente, ¿no?, de tener la oportunidad después de tantos años volver a los inicios, y él es el que nos motivó que esto sí que se podía hacer, ¿no? Yo solo voy a aportar un matiz en que yo creo que puede ayudar, ¿no? Que nosotros hacemos el empleo con apoyo teniendo en cuenta también que entre ellos se pueden apoyar. Entonces, en nuestros entornos laborales siempre van 2 personas con autismo. Y esto es una experiencia que ha proporcionado muchas satisfacciones, pero sobre todo muchas mejoras, porque ahí intentamos compensar las fortalezas de uno con las fortalezas de otro, y esto funciona francamente bien. Y también aprenden ellos que se pueden ayudar mutuamente y que nadie es mejor que nadie, y dan un ejemplo y un modelo de compañerismo importante. Entonces me parece que esta es una aportación que quería destacar y dejarla aquí en este congreso. Muchas gracias.
Thank you. Thank you. Gracias. Gracias. Coffee break? Any other questions? Juan is letting me take one more question. He's a hard taskmaster. Or I'm standing between you and your coffee break. It's good. Coffee break. Thank you.